Hello, animation fans, and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. I'm your host, Larry Vasquez, and you're listening to episode 63. In this episode, we have Erik Morgansen joining us. Erik is a longtime animator with over 20 years experience in the industry. He started out at Walt Disney Animation Studios with Meet the Robinsons, and which was a really cool story in the interview that you'll listen to. His last 12 has been as a senior animator at ILM, where he's worked on such films as Rango, Ready Player One, Pacific Rim, all the Transformers movies, and the most recent one, obviously, Bumblebee. Erik has a wealth of knowledge, having worked this long in the industry, as well as still an excitement for animation, which bled throughout the interview, as you'll see. Erik will also be joining us as an instructor for one of our Creature Workshops class this coming July. So it was just really neat to kind of get him in on the podcast, someone who has that much experience, who's excited about animation as well as teaching. So give a listen. Erik, first of all, I really just appreciate your time. It's always neat when I was looking at your resume. You know, you've got 20 plus years here in the industry.
Yeah.
And, for me, and I know I'm sure our audience, it's always a neat opportunity to get to talk with a lot of people like you who maybe we don't have firsthand accessibility, and it's just always neat to hear the wisdom and the things that you've kind of gone through and to hear about that. So I really just appreciate you joining us on this podcast.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Very cool. I usually like to, as I mentioned earlier, I try to keep things very conversational. So I'm always kind of curious to see how, you got into this industry. Looking at, again, your bio, it's been 20 plus years. So how did you get into animation? Was it something you always wanted to do, and how did you pick up on the training?
Yeah, well, kind of yes and no. Like I loved animation as a kid. Like I grew up with all the, Warner Brothers, Chuck Jones stuff and Disney stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I always loved animation, but it was not my plan to get into animation as a career. It kind of happened as an accident. I went to the University of Oregon. And so I kind of got like the typical university experience where you get like a well-rounded kind of educational experience. You do a lot of different stuff. And they had a program there. I was in like a design and fine art program.
Okay.
And I signed up for a class that was called motion graphics. And I thought it was like graphic design, but like logos and things like that. That was more like like an edited kind of graphic design kind of thing in motion. But it turned out to be like it was a weirdly titled thing, but it turned out to be like a traditional-ish animation class where we were doing pencil tests on like old style Bolex cameras.
Oh, cool.
And a whole bit, and like developing film and all that kind of stuff. So, like we did bouncing ball tests. It didn't get into the production method of doing animation that you learn in a school like this, or like the training that I eventually got at Disney. But it sort of got at some of those stuff. It didn't quite sink in the way that it needed to, but that's how it started. But when I started with it, I didn't like it at all. It was so super hard. It felt like it took forever to get any results. I didn't like the results I got. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like wasn't what I intended to do. And now I'm kind of stuck in this thing. And it was like a year-long class. It was like one of the only classes where you sign up at the beginning of the year, and then it goes for the full year. Everything else is term. So it's like, God, I don't want to do this for a whole year. This is super frustrating. But I just felt like I can't let this beat me, because it's going to eat away at me if I walk away from this feeling defeated. So I'm like, I'm just going to stick with it, just out of some weird determined
tenacity, huh?
I guess, yeah, some strange, like I don't know where that comes from, but so I kept going, and by the end of it, I'd invested so much effort and time that it was like I kind of couldn't quit. And then I got an internship doing it, and then I'm like, well, now I'm doing this. And then I got it so it just kind of like went from there. And like after a couple of years, I'm like, I guess this is what I'm doing. Like I've been doing this for a while. So anyway, that's how I got my start. And then, after that amount of time, I realized that, no, this is exactly what I need to be doing, because it's the synthesis of all the stuff that I like. It's the synthesis of, performance and drawing and design and, sound and music and all the stuff that I'm interested in. It's like every artistic form all put together into one, and you can kind of pick and choose, but you really have to kind of, you've got to put these pieces together to make something that's where you can use all of those elements to tell a story in subtle, or even to whatever degree that you want. So it was like, oh, this is what I should be doing, and I just needed to kind of like grind away at it for a while until I realized that was the thing.
Now, did you have any idea going into you said it was Oregon University, right?
Yeah.
The Ducks. All right.
Yeah.
did you have any idea of what you kind of wanted to do, or as you said, this was kind of end up kind of going, okay, yeah, this makes sense now.
Yeah.
But did you have any idea initially?
Yeah, I thought I was going to end up doing like a graphic design thing, or
Okay.
That's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was
Okay.
going to do graphic design or some
Okay.
industrial type design. But yeah, and I'm still interested in that kind of stuff. But I realized that I can do that and all this other stuff.
Right.
I mean, there's so much, there's so much of those things that support what happens in animation.
Right.
Like you look at so many animated things and it has that as an element to it, either within the thing or to support it and to promote it or that kind of stuff. So, or to promote yourself as an animator, promote the thing that you made. So it's just it's another component of it. And I realized that, I can still do that.
Yeah.
For me, the hardest thing has always been to choose something because there's so many things I'm interested in. And it's like animation was a little bit of a cop out because it's like, I got to focus on the craft of it and, the fundamentals of it. But it's sort of a cop out in that I can still do all this stuff.
Gotcha.
And it still falls into the category of animation in a way. So it was my way of not picking something kind of. Yeah.
Which is kind of neat because sometimes we'll get people on here and it's like, I always love drawing. I knew I kind of want to go down this road. Or, like, Jason Ryan, who was going to be an accountant at first, and so
I didn't know that.
Kind of, yeah.
That's great.
It's just always kind of neat to see it, particularly in this type of field where you could do it at, kind of almost any point in life, so it's just kind of a neat opportunity. So,
yeah, I think that's true for sure. Yeah. I think you just, it's one of those things where it's like, especially for students too, like, I think it's a good thing to, like you say about doing it at any point in your life. I think it's important to like continually be a beginner at something, like throughout your life, whatever it is, like different kinds of stuff. Animation is one thing where once you get into it, it's like you really can spend your entire life practicing this craft and never master it.
Right.
It's a decades-long practice. So it's the kind of thing where it's like, you can dedicate yourself to this and kind of always be a beginner.
Yeah.
You're just a new version of a beginner. So for me, there's a lot to be said for that. I think
that's cool.
It's valuable in that regard too.
So now, how quickly out of university did you land a first gig, or how did that transition from there?
Yeah. So as I was finishing, I did a post-bachelor degree. And so my last year was like an animated film. At that point I was pretty set on doing animation. That was what I wanted to do. So I did that. And then for that last year, I got an internship and I started working. And this is how long I've been doing this. At that point in time, like to get any kind of amount of time on a Silicon Graphics workstation, that's what everybody used. Like if you were going to do high-end animation, you had to be on an SGI. And unless you were at like an ILM or a PDI at the time, or I guess Pixar was definitely around because they were, the Pixar shorts were big. Like Luxo Junior was the big thing. When I was in school, that's how long I've been at this. But to get any time on a Silicon Graphics workstation was super rare because there just weren't that many around. But there was a company in town that had a few of them. And they weren't doing films. They were doing like TV commercials and like what were called ride films, like location-based entertainment stuff. Plenty of companies still do that stuff now, but that was kind of what they specialized in. So I got an internship there and I was able to start training on those machines. They didn't have anybody there that was doing character animation. They were doing like camera fly-throughs and kind of like environments and stuff like that. So I didn't have any real mentors there about how to get into doing characters. And I didn't really have that training when I was in school either. Just no one really knew how to do it. It was very rudimentary kind of stuff. But I was determined to do that. It was where I wanted to end up. I wanted to end up doing films. So I kind of had that set as a goal. And that was how I started. I started with that company and I was there for 2 or 3 years. And they had really good artists. There were people there who their background was all fine artists and they had kind of transitioned to learning how to use computers. So it was a good environment for me to be in, but it didn't have the component of here's the process of doing character animation. So I had to kind of piece things together and figure it out by, looking at Pixar short films or looking at Disney stuff or reading about things. And it's, in my mind, I thought, I can just figure this out. And I kind of could look at things and sort of be like, okay, I see what they're doing. I didn't know why. I didn't know enough about how the fundamentals work to know why you would do things in a certain way. So there's a lot that's just missing because it's like, well, I can make it look like that, but I'm just putting pieces of things together. And how they relate is kind of, it's a little bit dicey. It's kind of like, well, if you understand that these are the fundamentals, then you're like, oh, okay, well, you wouldn't do that. That doesn't make sense. Like that doesn't really relate to that. That doesn't go there. So that was the piece that was missing for me. So I was sort of able to do it. I could kind of fake my way through it, but I was sort of just stumbling through.
Gotcha. So how did you, because you mentioned you did the Disney training, how did you get
I did, yeah.
there?
So I eventually, I knew that if I wanted to get into doing movies, I was gonna have to either move to San Francisco or LA. And LA seemed kind of crazy. It just seemed like an intense place to be. And I'd done a little work there. The company that I was at, they opened an office there.
Okay.
I was able to kind of be there a little bit, and I sort of got the idea of it. I'm like, well, I could probably do this. But I didn't have enough specific high-end like character animation stuff on my reel. It was all, again, like I was just kind of faking my way through it to get into a bigger studio. So there was that, it was that kind of catch-22 of like,
yeah,
to get the experience, you need to get in. To get in, you have to have experience, kind of thing. So I kept trying, and I kept, applying to all these studios, and I just couldn't get in. And so I eventually moved to San Francisco, and I started working for it was the dot-com days, the first round of the dot-com days.
Okay.
A company that was doing real-time internet animation, and they were doing a bunch of they had a contract with Warner Brothers to do like online real-time animations of traditional Warner Brothers characters. Was one of the main things that we did there.
Wow.
It was really cool. And it was all proprietary software, so I had to kind of learn some new stuff. And it was all like there wasn't a curve editor. Everything was like, it was basically like doing stop motion animation. Everything was like linear based, so you had to put in tons of breakdowns. So I had to like kind of figure those things out, and I had to like really study those cartoons that I grew up with. And I learned a ton of stuff of just saying like, oh, okay, well, if I want to make it look this way, I have to really pay close attention. I think that was the first time that I started getting that in my head of like, oh, well, they're doing really specific things here. It looks like, oh, they're just moving like this. And then, they take it, there's this pose and there's that thing. But when you start looking at it closely, it's like, oh, there's a lot going on that I don't understand. And that was kind of my first wake up call of like, oh, the stuff we're doing, like, it's not looking right. It doesn't look like their stuff. It's so specific. But, I got into doing that. And then from there, I do from there? That kind of turned into some other jobs. I ended up doing freelance for a long time.
Okay.
And then at a certain point, I decided that I'd applied again to like Pixar. I think I got turned down by Pixar 2 or 3 times. And it's the worst when you get turned down by Pixar, because they don't just say no. First of all, they'll send you a letter and say, we're not, we don't need your skill set at this time, which is like, okay. It's a really nice way of saying no, but then they would always send my reel back to me.
Okay.
It was like they didn't even keep it on file, and I'm like, oh god, back. We don't even want this in the building. Just here, take it back. It's the worst. So that happened a few times, and it was just like super demoralizing. So at a certain point, I was like, well, I just don't have the stuff on my reel. And I'd been using this proprietary software, and everybody who was doing animation at a high level was using Maya, and I had trained in Softimage. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to learn how to use Maya. And so what I decided to do was I decided to come up with an idea for a short film, animated film that I was going to do, and I was going to use that as a test subject to learn how to use Maya. So I just made myself a project and just basically looked at the online tutorials, or not even tutorials. I just looked at the documentation, like how Maya worked, and I used Softimage, so I knew what it was supposed to do. I just knew where the buttons were essentially, and I kind of knew how to rig things, and I kind of knew how to do all this stuff. So I just went through and I built a character, and storyboarded the thing out, and modeled it, and rigged it, and did the whole thing, and then animated it. And put this whole thing together. I did the music, I even like spliced together music and stuff like that. So I did this thing, and then same deal, like I sent it off to studios and kind of got turned down. And then I was working at a place, and somebody was like, you got to go to SIGGRAPH. Like, if you can't go to SIGGRAPH and come away with a job working in a studio, then you should just pack it in. So I was like, okay, well, I guess that's it. This is the real test.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So I did. So I went down to SIGGRAPH. It was in LA that year. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I took my reel, And I was like, I'll just drop my reel off to all these different studios and we'll see what happens. And as it turned out, no one was accepting reels except for like one game studio in Florida and then Walt Disney Feature Animation. And so they had a booth there, Disney did, and I was like, oh, they had all this, the booth they had at SIGGRAPH was amazing. And they were showing all this really cool looking CG stuff. I'm like, I didn't even know Disney was doing the CG.
Okay.
So this was like just as they were transitioning from the 2D to the 3D stuff. And they had some like real rudimentary, like just basic stuff, kind of proof of concept stuff for Meet the Robinsons. Meet the Robinsons. And then they had some Chicken Little stuff. Now, Chicken Little was their first feature. So they were showing some of this stuff, but they still didn't have that much. They were still just beginning, I think, on Chicken Little at that point. And I was like, well, wow, this actually looks really cool. And so I was like, well, here, can I give you my reel? And I think I happened to run into two guys there at the booth. There were these two guys, and I talked to them like, nice, super friendly guys. And so we chatted for a while, and I'm like, oh, this seems great. Like, this is amazing. And they're taking reels, so obviously I have to get. So like, here, can I just give you my reel? And they're like, oh, well, you got here. Go talk to this person over there, and she'll tell you what to do. So I went over, and she's like, okay, here, fill this thing out, and then go down the street to this place, and you can hand your reel there. And I'm like, okay, fill this thing out and look at the address, and I go down the street. So it's like it's down like Figueroa Street or something like that, like 10 blocks away, and it's at this hotel. And it's like, go up to the 4th floor, and it's suite 302 or something like that. So I go up there, and I'm walking down. I get off the elevator, and I'm walking down the hall, and it's this long line of people, like all the way down this hall. And I'm like, wow, this really is the only place taking reels. So I get to the end of the line, and somebody comes with the clipboard. Here's your NDA, sign all this stuff. So I went through and filled out the NDA. And by the time I was finishing and I got to the front of the line, and I turned the corner into the hotel suite where they were taking the reels, and I turned and looked, and it was like that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark at the end where there's the giant warehouse.
Okay.
Boxes. It was like that, but it was floor to ceiling boxes full of demo reels in this hotel suite. And it was just like, oh my, I mean, there were thousands. It was ridiculous. And so I was like, okay, here's my NDA and here's the reel. And that's the last, it was like throwing it into a black hole. And I was like, well, that's the end of that.
Here's this needle in this haystack right now.
Yeah. So then that was and I'm like, well, I guess I'm not getting a job as an animator in movies. So I went back to what I was doing. I went back to San Francisco, and I went back to the animation job that I had. And I just kind of forgot all about all that stuff. And then like a year later, I got this call, and it was like, hey, this is such and such recruiter from Walt Disney Feature Animation. Are you interested in this program called the Animating Assistant Program? And I'm like, Walt Disney, like, how did they get my phone number? Like, I thought, this is a joke. Someone's playing a joke on me. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I realized, oh, maybe this was that, like, did they keep it? Did they still have my stuff? Like, it's been a year. And I was like, okay. And I was like, sure, I'm interested. What is it? And I don't know what this thing is though. What, can you describe it to me? And she's like, well, I'm just I'm a contract recruiter. I'm just sort of taking names. I'll put you in touch with someone who can give you more details. And I was like, okay. So, and that was it. And then it was like, someone's going to call you like in 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, sounds good. Interested. And so then I asked around to some people, like at that point I'd met some people who'd worked at Pixar and who'd been in different things. I'm like, have you heard about this? Like this Disney thing called the Animating Assistant Program? And they're like, no, I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is. I'm like, do you think this is some kind of scam? Like, am I going to, like, they want to hire me to go down and like to get coffee for people, and they're not going to pay me for it? And they're like, I don't know what that is. And like, this sounds super weird, but I couldn't get any information about it. And then 2 weeks went past. I didn't hear anything. And then 2 months went past. I didn't hear anything. And I'm like, wow, that's the end of that. So, I just kept doing what I was doing. I was doing animation, and I was doing okay. Like, I was making a living doing it. But I was doing like, video game cinematics and pretty much everything but movies. And so then like 6 months later, I get another phone call, and it's another like contract recruiter from Disney. And they're like, hey, are you still interested in that animating assistant? And I'm like, yeah, but so can you tell me more about what it is and like what's going on? And they're like, nope, sorry, I'm just a contractor. I don't have the details, but someone's going to call you in 2 weeks. And I'm like, it's like someone's playing a joke on me. This is crazy. So I'm like, yeah, I'm still interested. Okay. And, but then 2 weeks later, I got a call, and it was it was another recruiter from Disney, but it was someone who was actually at Disney, and they said, "Hey, I'm going to put you on the line with this guy, Mike Belzer." And I was like, "Okay, I'll talk to Mike Belzer." So I talked to him for a little bit, and super nice guy, and he was just had a conversation. And he was just like, "So, like, what kind of like what are your influences animation? Like, what are you interested in doing?" And we talked a bit, and and I said the same thing, that we talked about at the beginning, where it's like, yeah, I grew up with Chuck Jones, and like, I love that kind of style of animation, and I like, all kinds of different stuff, but that's like, it feels like it's like that's kind of in my bones because I grew up with that stuff. And he's like, "That's great." And he's like, "Here, I'm going to put you on the line with somebody else." And he's like, "Hi, this is Steven Anderson. And yeah, I just want to talk with you a little bit." And so I talked with him. We just had a nice chat, and they're like, "Okay, well, someone's going to call you in a little bit." And I'm like, "They're going to call you in a couple of weeks." That's like the story with these guys. And so anyway, so I got off the phone. And then like the next day I got a call, and they're like, "Hey, can you be down here in a week and start this program?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of like, I live in San Francisco, and I've got a job and a whole life here. Like, is there a way that like, and I don't even know what this is." Like,
Right.
they didn't really describe, can I come down and see what you're doing? Like, what this thing is? And so anyway, I was able to put it off for a little bit. So essentially the way that program works is they take 4 people a year. So 1 person per term. So every 3 months they take 1 person. And it's basically, you go through a training program that's like a school like this, except it's your full-time job. So I did get them to fly me down there and show me, like, this is a real thing, and you're going to go through this training program, and when you're not going to be just getting coffee for people and like $85 an hour, like, it's a real thing. And I was like, well, I'm already kind of working as a professional. Like, so it felt like a big step down. But then when I saw what it was, I was like, well, of course, I have to do this. It just looked amazing. And I talked to a bunch of people who were working there as animators who'd gone through the program. They're like, look, you have to do this. This is like a once in a lifetime, not even a once in a lifetime opportunity. This is a once in 1,000 lifetime opportunity. And then it was like, okay, yeah, I have to do this. But I was able to postpone it a little bit just to kind of get my life in order.
Transition,
next term. So I started then. So it was like me and another person started at the same time, and there was a gap. So there was 4 of us that year, and we went through that program, and it took about a year.
Now, is this what's now the Disney Talent Development?
They probably have changed it, and it probably has evolved into something else.
Okay.
But it's essentially, yeah. And so the program is like, so if you look at, if you go from Steamboat Willie to Snow White and look at like what happened, and that was 10 years between those 2 films. You look at them and you're like, how is that possible?
Right.
The reason that's possible, I mean, you've probably seen those memos from Walt Disney where it's like, hey, we need to put together this school. And so they essentially kind of absorbed the Chenard School and brought in their own people and created a mentorship program within Disney of like the 9 Old Men. And that was the school they created inside of Disney. So that's what the program that I went through, that's what it had become at that
Gotcha.
point. And then I'm sure it's evolved into something else, and it still exists there.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. Like, and it's usually they take people from within the company to apply for it. Like,
okay.
When I was there was a guy who came from like 3 people from Imagineering, and then myself and another person had come from the outside, but evidently that's uncommon. Okay. And it's still a shock. And it was just the director, Steven Anderson, somehow, like, I mean, this is the thing too, like, people, if you feel like, things just kind of can happen. Like, it's impossible that reel that I put into that hotel suite with the 10,000 other ones ended up on the desk of the director of that movie.
Wow.
It's impossible. Like, it's just not, it's not possible. But it did. And he like, the animation was kind of crude. It needed a lot of work, but he looked at it and said, like, this guy's got some cool storytelling ideas, and it's a complete thing. And like, we could get him, just with some training, we could get him to this level. Right. So he could really begin and be an animator here.
Very cool.
And so, yeah, and that was it. And I still look back on it now, and it's like, it's not possible. It's just not possible that it happened, but it did. I can't argue about it. But anyway, so that's why I'm interested in teaching in a school like this, because that's basically how I learned. I tried to do it myself, but after going through that program, it's like I couldn't do what I do now as an animator, having not had that experience of having a mentor and having a very dedicated thing where it's like, you need to be focused. You need to go through the process of here's how you create an animated shot. Right. You need to do all the steps.
And that's what I love about what we do here at iAnimate is it's the live classes, it's the live reviews. You're getting that one-on-one kind of, similar to what we're doing right now, where we're getting that feedback. You're getting your shots reviewed by someone like you who's been in the industry for a length of time, who are going, like you mentioned earlier, yeah, that's, you know, that's a cool idea, but, you know, and you're cutting down that learning curve, you know?
Right.
So who were some of your mentors there during that time?
Well, see, so the mentor I had was a guy named Randy Haycock, and his first movie at Disney was Lion King. So he went through went through the Cal Arts program, and then started as like an apprentice at Disney. I think Glenn Keane may have been his mentor.
Okay.
I think that's right. But anyway, so he was a great mentor. He actually was an awesome mentor. And one of the real important things he taught me that made a big impression on me was that and that Disney studio is a specific kind of an environment. And the way that environment works is that you got to really hustle for every little thing. So if you want to you start out with like the lowest C-level shots. And if you want to get to be an A-level shot animator, you got to keep improving yourself a lot of times until you get there. Which is it's a trial by fire kind of thing, but it's a really good way to learn. Because it's like you have to, like, you're not going to miss anything. You're not going to miss any steps along the way, because they're going to make sure that you do it 4 times brilliantly before you take the next little step to the next thing. So one of the main things he taught me was just that, like, look, if you like, it's not going to get handed to you. You need to take this C-level nothing shot they give you and pretend it's an A-level shot and put everything you have into making it great. Because that's what you're not just doing this, you're also demonstrating that, first of all, you got the drive to do it. And then second of all, that you can conceive of how to get to that point. So that was something he learned. He did his first shot at Disney was this in The Lion King. I think I know it from the movie too, because I've watched this movie a lot of times recently with my son. I've got a son who's 6 years old, and he likes this movie a lot. The original Lion King movie, thank God, he's got good Disney animation. There's a shot with Simba, and he's way in the background. It's like at the end, and he's going back to Pride Rock, and he's gonna face Scar or whatever. And there's like a tiny line, and it's like I don't think it's even like a shot where you see it full on. I think it's like a transitional shot where it's like it's somewhat like it's somewhat and it's somewhat of a transition to something else. I don't think it's ever even clear, but it's tiny in the background. And he just decided, like, I've got this tiny little lion that's like a nothing shot that's no one's really ever going to see, but I'm going to make it look like the best lion running animation that anyone's ever seen. And he was like, that was the thing that got me started, because someone saw that and said, like, okay, this guy's serious.
Gotcha.
Not messing around. Like, let's see what he can do with this. We'll give him something a little bit more. And that's where you want to be as an animator when you get into production, is you want them to see what you do and say, huh, all right, okay, well, let's see what they do with this. Let's see what she does when we give her this. Let's see what he does when we give her a little bit more. And then it's like, oh, okay, all right, a little bit more. You don't want it to be like, okay, I guess we'll give him something else. It's been a while. You want it to be like, huh, okay, all right, well, now what? Let's see what you can do with this.
Nice.
And it becomes like this back and forth thing. So that was the way I tried to approach it. Of like, okay, when I show this in dailies, I want it to be like, huh, okay. Right. You know a couple things, huh? Let's see about this.
So what were some of your first things that you jumped onto, some of your C shots?
So let's see. I think one of the first shots I did was actually, for a C-level shot, it actually it was a C-level shot in the sense it was super short. And this is a good learning experience for me too, is that it seems like when you're a beginning animator, a short shot's an easy shot, but sometimes they're the hardest shots, because it's like, in this 45 frames, you need to sell these 2 ideas. And it's like, I kind of have time for one of those ideas. And so you're trying to put both of them. So I had a shot with one of the main characters in Meet the Robinsons, the kid named Lewis. And it's the moment where the mom so he's an orphan. And so the dynamic is that he's looking for a mother. His mother has left him and abandoned him, he thinks. And so he's, there's this missing piece, and there's this moment where he's accepted by this family, and the mom kind of like invites him in to the family. And it's this moment of him realizing that, oh, well, hold on a second. Like, all of a sudden he realizes that this was the thing I was looking for, and he didn't expect it to happen that moment. So it's like, he's surprised and happy, and it's a lot of emotion, and it's a very specific kind of thing. So it couldn't be just like, oh, great. It had to be there was a smile, but it's like there's a lot going on there.
Subtext there.
And so it's like, yeah, that's a lot to try and fit in. I mean, that's a lot to try and fit into that many frames in general. But then it's like, okay, that's a really specific acting moment. Like, how do you do that? And so it was a lot of like trying 10,000 different smiles, and and then also trying to like get into that feeling of like, well, what would that feel like, and how would that be? And then I got to work really closely with, that wasn't was that Nick Rainieri? Maybe that was Nick Rainieri. I think he was the Lewis lead. I think that's right. I'm almost certain that's the case. God, I forget that. Let's say it was Nick Rainieri, but
a little bit. Huh?
No, I'm almost certain that it was, because I worked a lot with Nick Rainieri. I ended up it went well enough that he ended up giving me those shots.
Very cool.
That was the thing. It worked well, but I got to work directly with him, and I got to. I mean, that really is the thing. Like, once you start working with people who've done this for a long time, and people who have a really good sense of those things and have had to solve those problems over and over again, and it gets easier, and it's like that's the thing that catapults you to the next level, is because they can just download that stuff on you, and it's like, I never would have. It's like the not knowing what you don't know thing. And like, you start giving this information, it's like, oh man,
light bulb.
There's no way I would have figured that out. Or if I did, it would have been 20 years from now.
Right.
By accident. And you're like, I didn't even know how to think about it in the way that they're thinking about it, much less do it.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of those kind of moments. So it was one of those things. And then from there, it was like, again, like, okay, that worked. And then I got some more. And then it was every time I had something, I'm like, even stuff in the back, let's give it a little bit of character, not to steal the show, but enough to like give it some life. So it felt like everything had a life to it. And every character had their own initiative and their own thing that they're doing, even if it was just like a background thing or whatever. And it was like, I'm just going to put everything into this. And I just approached everything that way. And
very cool.
And it was it was the right way to do it, for sure.
Yeah. Now, did you work with Jason Ryan on that one?
I don't think I ever
Robinsons, but I think
he did work on Meet the Robinsons, but he ended up coming on later.
I think that's what. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, he came on towards the end of that one, and he had a big sequence at the end with Lewis, and he did a bunch of stuff. I don't know that I ever got any direct. I don't know if I ever got any direct notes from Jason, but the one thing that I did get, they had a lot of really good resources at Disney. One of the cool things they had was, so for the supervising animators, they had all done like recorded lectures, and it was basically just them talking about their process for doing animation. And I'm sure that you recognize when you work at a studio, you can sit down with, like, if there's 50 animators there, their shots are all going into the same film. But you could sit down with any of them and say, like, how'd you do that? And they're all going to tell you something different. And they're all going to have their own thing, right? And it's like, this guy's doing thumbnails. This guy only does video reference. This guy does no video reference. He just starts blocking it in, and it comes out of some weird genius part of their brain. He does it this way, and that's just how it goes. So everybody had done their own lecture on their own personal process for doing animation. And so I looked at all of them. There were videos of all of them. So I just studied all these lecture videos, and then they had live lectures too that you can go to. But there's probably like 15 of these lectures, and I looked at all of them. And so there's a bunch of them, and they were all kind of like, okay, I see the process. Then I got to Jason Ryan's, and his was the most bananas thing I've ever seen in my life. So his way of animating was, so he came from a 2D background. Mm-hmm. So what he would do is he'd get a shot turned over by the director. He'd go sit at his desk. He would draw. We had a tool there called, I think it was called like a markup editor. So you had your video playback tool, and they had, almost every studio's got a thing where they've got some kind of setup so you can draw over it, so directors can draw over your stuff. But oftentimes animators would use that draw over tool to do like secondary animation stuff, and you just like test things out, like do pencil tests. So he would use that. He'd take his layout camera, render it out with no characters in it. So he would do a video playback of just the background. So it was a camera move or something like that. And then he would take that markup tool and he would draw on 4s, straight ahead animate his shot. So like there's 140 frames, and he'd do the whole thing on 4s, straight ahead animating. So in his lecture, which was like 45 minutes long, he had a shot that was assigned like 20 minutes before he showed up to do his lecture. He animated the whole thing on 4s in like 30 minutes. And then he was like, this bit here, I think I'm staging the character wrong. And so he erased a bunch of stuff and started over, and like, that's better, because now I'm open to the camera with this, and I'm tugging on the thing there, and I like that, and that's better. He did the whole thing. And then when he finished his lecture, he went and showed it to the director, got a couple notes, made his change. And then what he does is then he takes that hand-drawn thing, makes that, exports that as a movie, makes it the image plane in Maya, and then he would rotoscope his character over his 2D animation on 4s. So within like 2 hours, he's got a rough blocking pass that's got all the breakdowns in it. And so he would consistently, like our quota on those movies was like 5 feet per week. He would consistently do 50 feet per week. And I've never heard of anybody animating that fast before. So I was just like, this is crazy. And so I'm like, go ahead.
What I love about this is that anybody who's taken a workshop here at iAnimate is probably cracking up listening to this, because Jason, throughout the week, once a week, it's kind of like having a second instructor here at iAnimate.
Oh yeah.
He does a live weekly demo for 2 hours, and he does the same exact thing.
That's great. I'm so happy to hear that he's still doing it.
Oh yeah.
I've told people this over the years, and everyone's like, what? Are you serious? I'm like, yeah. Craziest thing.
It's fast, and the sketches are real rough, but he gets a sense of motion and timing and stuff. And that way, once he gets into Maya, he's already has an idea, and he's not trying to figure it out there. He's okay. I know about this, and he'll, once he kind of gets the blocking, he scraps it and kind of really starts working with it. Yeah, but he's already got, like you said, a blocking pass that he's pretty confident with.
Yep, exactly. He's got all the stuff worked out. So I decided, okay, I'm going to give this a try. And for about 2 months, I did this exclusively.
Very cool.
I'm going to stick with it. And it was terrible. And my animation looked awful. And it really held me back. And it was the worst. But after a couple of months, I started to get a little better at it. And then after another month, I was better. And then after about 6 months, I was pretty good at it.
Very cool.
And the thing about it that helped was that it forced me to figure everything out. I couldn't lean on, I'll just, when I get to that part in the blocking, I'll do that when I get there. Because there's nothing to look at.
Right.
So the thing it forced me to figure out was, what are the feet doing? Because I had to be able to understand how much the character could move in the volume that they're in. The legs will only stretch so far.
Yeah.
So I had to be thinking about, where's the next footstep happening? Where's the next foot contact? If I'm going to shift the heel, what am I going to do? And then how's the hip going to shift? And because there's nothing keeping it on model, it's just drawings, I had to do all that myself. So I had to hold all that stuff in my head. It forced me to
That's cool.
figure everything out and then hold it all in my head, even though I was doing the drawings. It just forced me to do all that stuff.
Right.
And after it wasn't even so much of doing the thing. It was that it was training my brain to solve all the problems first.
That's great.
In the way that ideally thumbnailing does.
Right.
But for some reason, because there's no way to hide, like in your thumbnails, if you're off a little bit, or if it doesn't, if you can leave some things out, and it's not going to be offensive to you when you look at your thumbnails. It's going to be like, I just don't have a lot of thumbnails there. I just haven't worked out that part. But when you see it with your background plate moving and nothing happens for 12 frames, it's like, I got to put something in there. And if you're going to put something in there, it's like, I got to get the character from here to there. Well, what happens? Well, the foot's got to I have to get there. The camera, it has to lead the camera. So I got to, how am I going to lead the camera? You have to solve everything.
Right.
And so by the time I started blocking my character, and there was no more I'll figure it out later. It was no, it's figured out. And so by the time I started blocking, it's like, now the blocking was super fast.
Yeah.
And it looked pretty good. It was cool. I knew what I was going to get.
What's cool about this is I did a podcast with a gal, Tina Navratsky, who worked on Cuphead. And it was a 2D animation. I don't know if you're familiar with the game, but it was a 2D animation, literally hand-drawn. They scanned it in.
Oh, wow.
Coming out here for, it's been out for a little bit for the Xbox, and PlayStation's coming out for the Switch.
I gotta check
but
this out.
It's a 1930 style of animation.
Wow.
But it was really cool. And so I had a chance to talk with her. But one of the things that was really interesting, though, was just her talking about the 2D side of animation, was a lot of what you're talking about here, where it made you really think about what you were doing versus jumping into the computer and eventually getting there, but not maybe necessarily knowing kind of how you got there. And so that's what it sounds like what you're talking about there. You had to work that out a lot. And so you're training yourself during that whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's easy to throw away drawings too. Like when
Yeah.
you do a pose, you can spend half an hour trying to get your pose looking right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you got a drawing, it's like, wow, it took me 10 seconds. Like, it's not great, but I'll just do another one. You know, I
Yeah.
can do way more drawings. And that was the thing. And that's, you know, the same thing with Jason Ryan. If he's going to do if he was going to block that in and pose stuff out, you know, that's 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's not like 10 minutes.
Right.
But
Right.
draw it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing too, was like, well, if I'm gonna get faster as an animator and better as an animator, it's got to be more immediate because
Yeah.
it's so time consuming.
Yeah.
I mean, animation in general is just so time consuming. Anything you can do to make the process faster, and it was like, I just have to do this. It's just the way to go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Has that changed much throughout the years now?
Yeah.
Your process?
I'll still use that. I mean, I'll still use thumbnailing, but I got to a point where I didn't need to do the pencil test anymore.
Right.
You know, I'd spent enough time getting that, getting it into me that it's like, okay, well now I know how much ground I can cover with a character that's this big, and I know what the puts in, I know how the weight's going to work, and I know how to put the drag here. I know, you know, it's just like but I had to go through that trial of fire to force myself to do it. And I think that if I had just been blocking characters in, I probably could have gone through a whole career without ever, you know, I could have just never forced myself to do that.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I got to the point where I could just thumbnail it and it worked fine.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. When I started ILM doing creature stuff, that's how I started there. I was just doing thumbnailing at that point, but I was still like, it was still kind of a funny, it's still kind of a funny situation. I worked on the first Transformers movie there, and I had this big long sequence of this character that jumps out of an airplane and slides down this thing and runs across this thing and hides from these guys and goes behind this thing and does this and jumps into this car. And it was like the shot had been assigned to me, and I'd been on it for 2 days. And one of the soups came by who was like the lead on that character. And they're like, how's that shot going? And I'm like, oh, I'm just about to start blocking. And they're like, you've been at this for 2 days. Like, really? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm almost done. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look, I've got all my thumbnails. Like, and they're like, okay. And then sure enough, like halfway through the 3rd day, I've got like super detailed blocking class. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, how does that work? Like, it just blew their mind. But I'm like, no, I'm almost done. Like, oh, now I'm just, yeah, like I already know what I have to do. It's like, you know, once I get to the point of getting the character, I just put on some music or listen to something, and it's just like, and you're there. But yeah, they were like, I'm a little worried about this. And then they're like, where did that come from? So yeah, I mean, that was a thing. So for the first, when I started ILM, that was my first process, was always doing that. And then there are just some movies where it has to look photoreal, and it's human looking ish designed characters. And for those, then I would shoot reference.
Okay.
But for a long time, I didn't shoot reference at all at ILM, and everyone was like, you seriously don't do it? But for some things, it's great. Like if you've got things that don't look like humans, or like, you know, a lot of it's creatures and things like that. And it's like, well, it's kind of a synthesis of some different animals, and you can look at some reference, but you still have to go study it. And then you got to blend some things together. Right. And it's like, well, it's got 6 legs. Like, okay, it's kind of an insect, but it looks like a gorilla. And it's like, well, okay. You sort of like, okay, I've got a lot of room to make stuff up now. I can just make it up. And then, you know, then the thumbnailing comes in handy, because it's like, well, all right, let's just do the mechanical stuff and figure it out. And then I can get everything, you know, it's the same kind of process. But so it's basically, I kind of dial it up and down depending on how, you know, how fantastical the thing is. Then I know I can go that direction. And if it's really super photoreal, then it's like, okay, now I got to lean on the video reference stuff.
That's pretty cool, though. You got your Batman utility belt, and you can pull that when you need to, or depending on the shot and project. Yeah,
it helps. I mean, I think that's it was a kind of a surprise to me. So once I'd arrived at that way of working, I kind of thought, well, this is just always the way I'll work. It works great. Until it didn't. Until it was like, this doesn't look photoreal enough. And I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And it was like, oh, like, let's shoot some video reference and use that, and then just break that down, and like, oh, it's kind of like having the pencil test I did, but it's just me acting it out. It's just it took me a while to get to the point where I could shoot decent video reference of myself. Like, I just wasn't good at it. It was like another skill I had to learn. I just hadn't done it much. You know, I'd do this thing where I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do 6 different versions of this thing. So I've got something to work with, and I go and shoot it, and I go back to my desk, and it'd be like, these all look exactly the same. What happened? Like in my head, like, yeah. And now I can do it. Like now I can shoot video reference and I can do a bunch of different stuff.
That's
like,
pretty funny.
You just stage it in a different way, like stage yourself. And then like, I can get into a different state of mind. And it was just practice. It's another thing where you realize like, oh, this is another skill you have to develop. It's not just like, well, you're either good at it or you're bad at it. It's like, well,
that's a cool point. So any advice, and maybe you'll hit upon that because you'll be teaching in our Creature 2 animal behavior class in July.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll get more into that here, but just any quick tips on how to shoot reference and get different looks.
Yeah. I mean, of course it depends on what, for creatures, it depends on if it's a humanoid type creature, for typically for the stuff like we'll do at ILM, it's less acting and more just creature behavior kind of thing. So it's that kind of stuff that's usually falls into that category. And so then it's just like, then you're going to find some kind of relative reference of like, if it's a creature that kind of relates to some animal usually, or something in the natural world. And so you spend a lot of time looking at that and saying like, okay, well, mechanically, how does this work? Try and, you got to have to find a way to get that into your body a little bit.
Okay.
But you can just kind of, you can kind of do it if it's a gorilla looking thing, or if it's a dragon looking, whatever it is, like somehow you got to kind of find the physicality of that. And again, that's kind of practice type stuff, but it helps it helps to do some kind of physical activity that requires you to be able to get your body to do certain things. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's necessary, but it's probably helpful.
Okay.
And then in terms of like and you just have to be clear about what the motivation of the character is and what's the point of the shot. Mm. And so just like spend a lot of time talking to your supervisors and directors. And it's like, well, who is this character? What are they doing? Why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they there? How do they relate to the environment and the other characters and things like that? And what's the point of it? Where's it coming from? Where's it going? And you quickly are going to narrow down the possibilities of what it is. And that's your friend. Like it feels like in animation, like those limitations or, they kind of stifle your creativity, but I think it's the exact opposite.
Right.
That those limitations are quickly become your very best friends, because it's, if it can be anything, it's the worst.
Yeah.
1,000 different things. You want it to be 10 different things at the most, but 1,000 things that's going to stifle you
too much. Yeah.
So it's narrowing it down as quickly as possible, and then you can work within that. But it's the tricky thing is finding some entry point into the state of mind of whatever the thing is, right? Okay. So it's, it's finding some kind of motivation. And if it's a creature, it's like, it's usually base level stuff, like you're chasing food, or you're looking for a mate, or you're being threatened, or you're trying to protect your young, or, whatever it is, or you're protecting something. And then it's just that, and like trying to, we're human beings, but we're animals too. And like, you're thinking about like, what does it feel like when I get angry and I lose my temper? Or what does it feel like when I'm scared and I'm not thinking rationally, and that kind of stuff. And so it's, you can use that same kind of sense memory stuff.
Gotcha.
Well, there's something there, some entry point into it, in the same way that you would if you're doing an acting performance of a character, trying to find the entry point into the state of mind of that character. It's, a similar kind of thing with animals and creatures too. Like there's something there, right? Like it's not like it's not like we're so detached from it. It's like, I don't know what it would be like to be a cheetah trying to catch a gazelle. Like, I think I know. I've been hungry.
Yeah.
I've been trying to catch something. Like, I think I've been chasing after stuff. I think I could kind of get. So yeah, you got to find some entry point into it. And then there's specific animal behavior that's just, it's just the way the animals behave.
Fundamental. Yeah.
They conserve energy in really specific and fundamental ways. And, then there's that. It's that kind of bit of too. Like it's, there's a reason that every lion you see running looks pretty similar, Not like in human beings, you can see like, 10 different people. And like, that's not even the same. It's not even the same kind of creature. Like,
yeah.
You watch 10 different people run, and it's like, okay, that's, an NBA player as opposed to a sprinter. And it's like, that's not even the same kind of creature.
Yeah.
So, gotcha. There's that bit too.
Do you enjoy the process of learning? Because you mentioned just, each creature and this and that. Do you enjoy that process of just learning about how each creature moves and acts and things like that? I mean, there's such a library of,
it's the best. I mean, it's the best being forced to do it. Like, okay, I gotta figure out chimpanzees. Like this whole movie's chimpanzees. You got to figure this out. And it's like, oh, good. Like, I haven't done that before. Okay, great. Like, we're going to look at a lot of chimpanzees. Like, by the time I'm done with this, I'm going to know how chimpanzees work. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the best parts of animation is that you're just given permission to like focus on something down to a granular level that you just wouldn't otherwise,
Right.
There's just no need to. You're not going to
Yeah.
become you're not going to be Jane Goodall, or you are, but in animation, it's like, well, I'm going to do that for a while. I'm going to focus on that for a while, but then I'm going to move on, and now we're animating cartoons
Birds and
or whatever, or something that flies. Yeah, and it's and that's the next thing, and it's
very cool.
oh, okay. What's that? How's this thing work? Yeah, it's the best.
That's neat.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, how did you transition from Disney over to ILM?
Let's see. So that when I was at Disney, so I went through that training program, and then I spent about that was kind of a funny deal. So that period in time was right when Disney bought Pixar.
Okay.
And so we were like maybe 80% done with animation on Meet the Robinson, and I had just finished the animation training program. So I was going to have like 3 months on Meet the Robinsons and then move on to whatever the next movie was. And there was a few that were in production that had been greenlit. It was like I think they had Rapunzel, which eventually became Tangled. That was in production. That was like, ready to go. American Dog, which became Bolt, was ready to go. And then something called Joe Jump, which became Wreck-It Ralph, was ready to go.
Okay. I didn't know that was original.
So everything was different. Everything was different stuff. And the reason it was different was because when the Pixar Brain Trust came in, they looked at all the stuff that was being done and they were like, stop. And start over with the stories. And so there was like, and they did the same. They didn't quite do that with Meet the Robinsons, but they had some issues with some of the points. So they had some issues with it. And so basically we went from being like 80% done with animation down to like 45% done with animation, which for me ended up being a good thing because it meant that I got like another almost year working on that movie.
Oh, very cool.
Which was great because I'd already gotten started and I kind of like, people could kind of see what I was doing, and I ended up kind of like getting up to A-level shots in that amount of time. Whereas if otherwise what would have happened was when they stopped working on the other productions, there was like a year where nothing was going on. They weren't doing any, and it was people just doing tests. So I got some real production experience, and that was great. But the thing that was not great was that they let half of the animation staff go because there was nothing to do.
Oh, okay.
That amount of time. So they had like hey, there's going to be a little bit of a readjustment in numbers. And everyone was like, oh, well, it can't be that many because we've got all these movies we're doing. So they're like, yeah, just, we're going to do this and it's going to be next week. There's going to be a little. And so everyone was like, oh, well, probably like a couple people. And then when it was all said and done and everyone was comparing notes, it was like, that was half of it. And it was like, oh my God. And so I was the last person who was hired at that time. And it was like, there was no chance. Yeah. So I was gone, but I talked to some people and they're like, look, like they're going to get things set up again and they're going to ask you to come back. So don't worry about it.
Back up.
Just hang out. And at that time, it was really cool the way they did it. Cause they had a job fair. Disney put on this job fair and they just let all the other studios come in and it's like, hey, we got like 50 animators who are some pretty awesome animators. And some of those animators were just like crazy good. It really was just a numbers thing. And so everybody just got snapped up by all these studios. And I didn't have a reel yet. I couldn't show any of the Meet the Robinson stuff yet because it hadn't been in the theaters. It was just finished. But I met with some folks at ILM and they were like, wow, like, tell you what, if you can come up and just maybe you can show some stuff and just not leave it with us. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So I managed to kind of sneak some shots out and put it on a reel. And I went and met with them and they're like, okay, we're going to hire a couple of people to finish up this Transformers movie. I don't think they even told me at the time. They just said like, we got a 3-month contract. And I was like, perfect. That's a perfect amount of time because then I can I'll go back home, start back at Disney and all good. So I was either going to go on to, it was like a Pirates movie they were finishing or Transformers. Unfortunately, I ended up on Transformers because it was a keyframe show instead of a motion capture show.
Gotcha.
And so then I did that for 3 months and it was sort of like after being at Disney, it was like being on Krypton and coming to Earth. Cause I was just like tearing through stuff and I did like, people were really struggling with a certain character that had all these pieces and he was kind of complicated. But just because of all the stuff I had done with like sketching things out and doing the pencil test,
Really?
like it was just super easy for me to do. And it kind of like physically related a little bit to one of the characters that I had been working on that was like a longer kind of spindly thing. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly what to do with this. And I just cranked out shot after shot with this character where no one else wanted to animate the characters. It was like, this character is impossible to animate. But the rigs we had at Disney were broken rigs. So that meant that there was no, I mean, every single piece was IK. So it wasn't like you move the hips and the chest and the head come with it. You move the hips and the chest and the head stay in place. And they did it that way. That was like an Eamon Butler thing. He felt like everyone here is used to drawing. Everyone knows how to keep things on model. It's a lot easier to fix things later if you don't have to worry about one thing affecting another. And some animators who were going from 2D to 3D were having a hard time with that. Like, the hips, what? Then that moves this stuff? Like, what? So they just made it so that everything's broken. So anything, you just had to keep it on model, which is a crazy way to work. I've never heard of anybody. It forced you to pay attention and keep everything on model.
Very cool.
So then when I went to ILM, it was like, this stuff is super, like, you just move, like, it all just stays together. Like, I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So it felt like everything took half as long. And I got assigned, like, one shot on this sequence, and I ended up doing, like, the entire sequence that, like, probably, like, 8 people would have animated.
Wow.
And I did it, like, and they were just like, what the hell? What's going on?
You were the Jason Ryan over there.
It kind of was, yeah. Like, they were just like, this is crazy. And so so it just kept giving me stuff. And I did tons of stuff on that movie. I still kind of blows my mind looking back. Like, I did so much stuff on that movie. So then 3 months turned into like, hey, do you want to like work on this other thing? Like, there's another movie. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But I kind of have to go. Like, I've got another, I think I'd set up like another job back in LA that I was supposed to start on. I think it was like a Rhythm Hughes, but Rhythm Hughes was still around. I was going to start another project there. And then that was going to kind of bridge me to when Disney was going to hire people back. So I was like, yeah, I can do a little bit more. So I started working. They're like, it's only like 4 weeks. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I can do that. So I worked on another thing. And they're like, hey, can you do this other thing? And I'm like, well, I don't really live here. Like, I'm like, I kind of have to go back and like this. And so they're like, well, okay. So they offered me a position there, and I kind of wanted to go back to San Francisco.
Back to hometown area, huh?
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll stay. And so then I was just there.
Very cool. That's a neat.
Been there ever since. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a neat opportunity on how that kind of just settled and worked out.
It's kind of the thing. But I think that's kind of how it goes. Like, once you get into a place and people can see like, oh, this person's pretty easy to work with, and they're nice to be around, and they get stuff done, and they kind of know what they're doing. And it's sort of like, once you're in there, you're just kind of there. And it's like, oh, it's sort of like, people who start out as an intern in places, and it's just like, just give it to him. He's here, give it to him. Like, or give it to her. She's an animator, right? She's right. The animators, like, give her that thing, see what she can, if you can, and if you've got enough, those opportunities, when they come, you don't need that many of those opportunities. When I look back at my career, it's like, I've had 3 breaks to get to like kind of the top level of senior animator. And it's like, not that many. It's not really that many things.
Your bio, about 20 years, but 12 of those have been a senior animator.
Yeah.
That's
more
amazing.
Than half.
Yeah.
So and I didn't start out, and I didn't, like some people that they get out of school and then they get a internship, or they start out as a entry-level animator at a studio, and then they just kind of go from there. And I didn't have that either. Like, I spent 10 years kind of like, I'm trying to get into movies. And then I just had like that Disney thing was like, again, like, it's still impossible. Like that reel ended up on Anderson's. And then to bring it full circle again too. So when I went to SIGGRAPH that time, and I was at the Disney booth talking to those guys, it turned out that one of those guys was Steven Anderson.
Oh, wow.
It just randomly. And the other one was, I'm going to forget his name now, a real famous story artist. He was the lead story artist on Meet the Robinsons, and I'm forgetting his name. It'll come to me. It's killing me that I'm going to forget the name. But so it was those 2 guys, and they're close buddies. And they were the story department on that movie. And then Steve became the director. Yeah, and I was just kind of chatting with those guys, and it was just super random that they happened to be there. And I think I talked to him about it later, and he was like, "Yeah, we just happened to be there. Like, we just stopped by." It's one of those things where it's just such a weird, like, it's all, everything about it's weird, but it's, again, like, it's impossible, but I think it's like the thing, like, if you just go, like, just show up and put your stuff out there. That's just how it's always gone for me. It's just like, just do, like, if there's an opportunity, just do it. And it might not end up being the thing that you think it's going to be, but it'll turn into something.
That's cool. Because I actually have one of my questions I have, you've been here in this for 20 years. What does it take, in your opinion, to be successful in this industry?
Yeah, you just have to not stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of points where, I got turned down a lot. I tried to get into doing movies for a long time, and that was the thing. I just didn't stop doing it. I was able to find a way to do it enough and make it work enough that I could keep doing it. And it probably helps to start a little bit younger too, where it's like, it's possible that if I'd had a family at the time and I was trying to start, that I might have made different decisions. And, but most people start this when they're reasonably young. That's probably a good thing. Yeah. And then just be flexible. And, when opportunities come up, you take the opportunity, but, there are the breaks. There are the opportunities that are a break where you break into something. And then there are the opportunities there that are the deceptive ones that you don't realize are opportunities. And those kind of are happening basically every day, all day long. And that's like, if you can work on something, if you can think about something, if you can force yourself to work a little bit harder, concentrate a little bit more, so that when those breaks show up, then you've got some skills and you have some things to offer. That's the thing. Because if those things show up and you're like, okay, I'm ready now. Now I'm going to start working. Now I'm going to start hustling. Then it's like, well, no, you missed it, because that opportunity was actually 10 years ago, and you needed to start, like, do what I did, where it was like, I'm going to try the Jason Ryan method. And it's terrible for 6 months. And then eventually my chemistry will change somehow, and I can do it just by brute force. That's what it took. So that by the time I got to ILM, it could have just as easily been like, hey, thanks for working here for 3 months, see you around.
Yeah.
But it was like, I'd done that for so long. They were like, well, this person somehow can do a lot of stuff and do things that other people are struggling with, and he's not having a hard time with it. We should probably hang on to this person. And that was it. It was a great opportunity, and I was there at the right time in the right place. And then I also had taken the opportunity before to, like, put myself into a position where I could just somehow distinguish myself.
Paid off. Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that exactly that specific thing, but something like you need to find a way to distinguish yourself somehow.
Yeah.
And that's just the grind of, like, okay, you got to do it. There's no hiding from it. You just have to do it. Like, yeah, there's just no hiding from the hard work of practicing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a senior animator, what are you looking for in an artist? What is it that kind of, like you said, that kind of helps distinguish them? Maybe someone who's underneath you, some of your artists that you manage. What is it that you look for that kind of helps distinguish? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it'll depend a little bit on the kind of production that it is, but you can usually see when someone has good fundamental skills, like they understand the fundamentals of weight shifts and, the right amount of anticipation, the right, the amount of residual action or overlapping action based on how forceful the action is, that kind of stuff. Like, some of those things are just universal, and you can see that, they get the timing thing, and they get the spacing thing, and they, like, the arcs make sense, and they understand. I mean, that you really can't, you can't underestimate the value of all those fundamental things. And when you see it done really well, it looks kind of magical. And it can be applied to all kinds of different stuff. So I feel like even, like, you could probably see an animator who's done, like, cartoony stuff, but there's enough there of those fundamental things you could say, like, you can transition to doing realistic stuff. It's just a little bit of a different way of thinking, and you kind of have to grapple with cameras in a different way, and you have to. But I mean, that was my background. Like, my real training came from doing feature animation stuff, but I didn't have a hard time transitioning to doing VFX animation, because it's really, like, the fundamentals were really the same.
Yeah.
But I feel like I could recognize that in somebody else, and I think that's really what it comes down to. It's like, you can't discount how valuable the fundamentals are. So I'd say, like, that's where you have to be. You have to really put all your energy into that. It's helpful when there's specific stuff, but you can get sometimes you see people get ridiculously specific, like, well, this show, I can see you've done a lot of animation and you've got a long reel, but you've never done flying monkeys, and this is a flying monkey show. I've seen you can do things that fly, and you've got monkeys on your reel, but and it's like, okay,
and you put those together. You're like,
yeah, so sometimes you'll see that. And I think that's kind of crazy. But I think that's probably an indication you don't want to work at that place if they can't make that leap. It's like, you're supposed to be an animation supervisor, but you can't look at this thing and bridge that. But that happens sometimes. Anyway, I mean, that sort of is what it is. But I feel like, I mean, I feel like you should be able to recognize the potential that somebody can fit into a situation based on the fundamental stuff. And then it's just personality thing. Like, do they have, reasonable, or are they someone that's reasonable to interact with? And you can usually get an indication of that too. I mean, that's one thing that I got to say, they've been genius at ILM about. It's almost uncanny how they hire people, and every time a new animator comes in you've never worked before, it's like, that is the nicest person I've ever met, and they're super talented, and it's every single one. And you realize it's a top-down decision where someone decided, like, this is the culture we're going to have. And all the animators who are making those decisions are like, we need to. At a certain point, it used to be that there were personality issues way back in the day there. At a certain point, all the lead animators are like, this is rough. Like, we got to start, like, when those people start leaving, let's make sure they get replaced with people who are just decent, reasonable people who are not going to fight about everything and have good skill. And so there's that part of it too. And that's another skill that you can develop too. And I've seen people kind of bite themselves on that stuff too. When I interviewed at ILM, there were initially 2 positions, and I knew the other person who was up for who was also interviewing, and it was someone who had more experience than me. And he was a really good animator, but he made a couple of comments that kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. And there were people, I kind of think it was one of the people in the room interviewing had done some of the shots and he was criticizing, and it was like, whoa, okay, and so it was basically like they offered me the job. I think I also interviewed first. That didn't hurt either. But they offered the position to me, even though I was more junior and I didn't have quite as much stuff and quite as, like, maybe even high level stuff as he did. He was a really good animator, but I think they just sort of felt like, oh, they were just a little off put by that. And I know that guy, and he's a really good guy, but he tends to kind of like, everybody's his brother and he's going to dig into you, like that kind of thing. It's all good natured, but it was enough to make them pause and think like, oh, I don't know if we want that energy in here. So there's that part of it too, where it's like you realize that, okay, this is a team effort, and the answer is always like, the director wants this and the supervisors want you to do that, and that's what you do. It's
gotcha.
You're there to
make that happen.
Realize their vision and do it. Even if you don't like the ideas, your job as an animator is to take their ideas that maybe you don't agree with and make them look great, even if they don't work, even if they aren't good ideas. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes you get directors who it's like, this is a weird idea and it's not going to work, and we already know it's not going to work, but that's the puzzle you have to solve. It's like, I am going to fulfill the note they gave me and make it look good. And then it's super satisfying. You can take it, the attitude that it's so dumb and it's a dumb idea, or you can say like, okay, this is not the way to go, but I'm going to make this work as best as is possible. And when they look at it, if it works, then that's the way it's going to be in the movie. And if it doesn't, then they're going to know that, okay, well, yeah, we gave it the best shot.
Yeah. I love that attitude.
The best version that it's going to be. And if it doesn't work, then, okay, well, now we know. And it's not like, well, you didn't try, or like, that's not what I had in mind. It's like, okay, that's better than I had in mind, and it still doesn't work. Or, yeah, that's an idea. You can tell when people are game for that kind of stuff. And that's where you need an animator for sure.
Cool. What are you enjoying working in VFX?
Oh, I love the variety of it. I've been fortunate to do a lot of different stuff. Done a lot of the same stuff too. I've animated every single Transformers movie, including the new Bumblebee movie.
I like that one.
It's good.
It was fun.
Yeah, I like that director a lot. I mean, that was like, of all of those movies, that was that was the one where we had a real animation director, and so it felt more like, and it was the mandate that it was more like the Iron Giant than like, than a traditional Transformers movie.
Yeah.
It was neat. It was very character driven and much more emotional, and
It was kind of funny. I know it was done kind of in the 80s, but it also kind of had that 80s pacing and nostalgia in its pacing and stuff.
Yeah, it's more Spielberg. It was that was a conscious thing. Of
Okay,
like,
cool.
What does it feel like a Spielberg movie? Yeah, so it's like a little bit more like E.T. and a little bit more like, yeah, this is not the typical Transformers. This feels like a traditional Spielberg.
Yeah, it just kind of had that 80s movie feel, you know.
Not a coincidence.
Kind of not cheesy in the bad, but kind of that where it's just like, that's, you know, it's fun. You know, it was kind of that 80s style. So it was a lot of fun in that regard.
Yeah, and it fit with the design too. It's like it's in that era, and it also feels like a movie you would see in that era. Yeah, like it was a great idea. Yeah, I love that concept too. We're all like, this is like, I see what like, he's making this like a Spielberg movie. Yeah, and it's like, and it felt that way in the I think they used the same lenses and everything. And
interesting.
Yeah, it was deliberately trying to be that. And so then those moments that feel more like a modern, you know, like when stuff gets big and crazy, it's like it kind of jumps out at you a bit more. Whereas typically in the Transformers movie, it's just nonstop bludgeoning of stimulation.
Right.
And I'm very much, I mean, I'm fine with that stuff too. It's fun to animate those movies. And for me, like, it's typically more fun to animate those movies than watch the movies because they're just all over the place and they're kind of hard to watch, but they're super fun to do.
That's like
you're nothing against Michael Bay because he's a great, he's a fun animator or fun director to animate for because he's sort of like, well, make it look cool. All right, make it look cooler, make it look funnier. And he gives you space to do it.
That's nice.
A lot of directors are like, it's on frame 28, this. And he's just like, I don't know, just make it look cool. And you're like, okay.
The rule of cool, huh?
Yeah, we'll do. Like, we'll do that. But yeah, I like that one too. So I had a lot of fun doing those movies. And then, you know, we get to do a lot of different stuff too. And then it's like the Jurassic Park movies are like, photorealistic stuff, and then like Rango was like,
I saw your reel had that. That was fun.
Yeah, it's a cartoon movie, but it's not exactly
right.
And that was a really odd. I mean, the whole thing about that was super unusual. Everything about that was the way that was done was really unusual. That was Gore Verbinski. He'd never directed an animated movie before. He shot the whole thing like a traditional feature. So he had the entire ensemble of actors. And so if you see a scene with the whole town together, he shot on a set all those actors together. They built a set that looks that has the same proportions that you see in CG, and they had all the people in costume performing, and they had cameras with a camera crew following him around. And he shot it in the way that they storyboarded it out first, and then he shot the movie. How
did that affect you for animation?
It was fantastic. So we had the reference of a story reel, the live action footage of them shooting the movie, and then the actors. So we'd have the actors reading the line or saying the line in their ensemble performance, and it would be like Johnny Depp's there and all the other actors are there, and then you'd have the actors in the sound booth reading lines too. So sometimes, for a piece of reference, you might get like here's Johnny Depp reading a line. It might be the first third of it is from the ensemble thing, and he's on set. The next third of it is from a sound booth and he's by himself, and then the other part of it is he's back on set but it's just him and he's not in costume, and they splice them together because the director's like, I like this thing like that. And sometimes you get like the thing he did at the end doesn't relate at all, just make something up. Sometimes it would be like none of what he's doing works, make the whole thing up. And then there was one sequence where the director had an idea, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be this moment where the character is like really kind of internal and subdued, and he's just been beaten down, and he's just, all of it's going to be just like him kind of deadpan, and he's just going to be like a little kid who's being scolded, and that's how we're going to play him just that way the whole way through. And then when they saw it, it was like, this doesn't work, it's not enough. And that was how the actors performed it. And so it's like, okay, we have to approach this in a different way. And then we made everything up. They just went a different direction with it, but it was the best reference for an animated film that I've ever seen, because it was
so
like,
much, huh?
You knew what the movie was, and you could see that it worked, and there was so much stuff there. And then on top of it, you get to embellish or change things or whatever. But it was like he didn't want a cartoon movie; he wanted a real movie that just happened to have cartoony.
That was animated,
weird characters in it.
Any reason why ILM hasn't done any other ones like that?
I think people just haven't brought them to us. I mean, that movie was designed to be a one-off. He was like, we're not doing, this is not a sequel kind of.
Right. I mean, just any other full feature.
There have been talk there's been talk about it. We've done tests for things, and it just hasn't happened. I think
Okay.
it's
Just
I
curious.
think it's harder to do in a part of it's just like that's just how it's gone.
Mm.
And I think that movie also didn't make like gobs of money. It was like it won the Oscar and it was critically acclaimed,
Right.
but it didn't make, it's such a weird balancing act with visual effects. The same thing with like the Bumblebee movie, like those Transformers movies that are so weird and like the original ones, and they're hard to watch, and it's like so much stuff, and people complain about it, and like no one, if you look at the comments online, everyone seems to hate them, but they go back and watch it 5 times and it makes like $1.5 billion. You're like, everyone hates this movie and it made $1.5 billion. And then like this movie everyone loves, the Bumblebee movie, and it's great and it's got all this stuff, and it's like, it did okay. It was kind of a disappointment. And you're like no one, like, it doesn't make sense. So it's like Rango was a great movie, and it's like there's so much there.
Gotcha.
There's so much into it, and it's such a sophisticated movie in a lot of ways, but it doesn't fit into a category quite, and it's not for kids really, and it's not. It's just, so it's, it's hard to quantify. So I think that might have had something to do with it. Okay. If it had been like a major, if it made $2 billion, and someone will just do something like whatever, just move some stuff around and we'll put a name on it and we'll put it out there. But so that might have had something to do with it, but it's hard to know. It's it's hard to know how those things go. But we've done tests. We did another test with some gore stuff that looked pretty interesting.
Cool.
And it's just, it's just somebody's got to get funding for it.
Yeah. That's always the
It costs a ton of money. So it's crazy. Yeah.
What was one of your favorite films that you've worked on?
I've had a few. I mean, Rango is definitely one of them. I really like working on Pacific Rim. Was super fun.
Cool.
Because Guillermo del Toro is just the best. He is Santa Claus.
Okay.
What it comes down to. Yeah, he just is. Like some directors, like this is the thing you realize about directors is like, or just managers in general. Like, there isn't one way to do it. There isn't one way to motivate people. But I think it is true that you can get the same result with in a lot of different ways. It's kind of like different animators working in different ways. You can get the same result, and some people do it in different ways. Mm-hmm. Some directors are just super intense, maybe even a little abusive, and they're just awful to work for. It's always great, but it can be draining, and it can be like, it can feel very adversarial, and it can feel very like you're messing up and you're ruining the movie and blah, blah, blah. And this thing isn't any good, and what you guys are doing is terrible. And it's just all like, it's the motivating with sticks rather than carrots thing. Mm-hmm. And then you can look at a director like Guillermo del Toro, and at least with the way that he dealt with us, was like, everything was like, guys, this is great. This is so good. Also, let's do this. And everything was that. It was never like, no, that's no good, or this isn't the right thing. It was always like, I love it. Yes, this is it. And then also, let's do this thing. And his suggestions would always be like, oh, it's a great idea. Yeah.
Very cool.
Always like plussing things out and pushing things. Mm. And he just had it was just the best experience.
That's cool.
It was so much so that, like, typically how it goes, even if you're working with a director who really likes what you're doing, there'll be a few daily sessions where it doesn't go well. And it's like, they don't like anything that day. And it's just a lot of pressure for, they're under a ton of pressure. And so that sometimes they have bad days, or sometimes you're off the mark on stuff, or the pressure's on, and it's like, we got to get this thing done. And it's not looking good yet.
Yeah.
And it's just, and you walk out of that daily session just demoralized. And so, like, we had session after session with Guillermo, and we kept walking out. Like, everyone was having this feeling of like, what's going on? Like, every one of these is good. Like, when does the bad one happen, where we all, like, we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it never happened. And eventually we just realized, no, this is just how he is. Mm. But I have a great, and so I don't think that's a coincidence, and I don't think that was like something that he kind of manufactured. I think he was just so excited about being there. So I had this experience when that movie started. I happened to be walking down the hallway, and it was the first day that he showed up to ILM to address the crew. So it was right at the beginning when we started production. And I was walking down one hallway, and he was just happened to be crossing the other way. And I was kind of down further back, so he wouldn't have noticed me. I could see him in the distance. I'm like, that's Guillermo del Toro. And the executive producer on the movie was leading him towards the production area of that film, and I could see him, and he's walking behind that guy, and he's kind of like, here's this thing and here's that thing, and he's kind of showing him all this stuff, and Guillermo was like looking around like, wow, I'm in ILM, this is wow. And you could see the look in his eyes and like a kid. And it was just, it kind of like made it just, I could feel it. You could feel it.
You're like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, it was a private moment he was having, because the other person wasn't looking at him. He was just kind of showing him stuff, and he was walking behind. And so the producer's walking away, and he just kind of stops, and he's just looking at all this stuff, because in the hallways they've got all this kind of different stuff from different movies and artwork and maquettes and all this kind of stuff. And he's just like looking around, and you could see he's just nodding his head, and he had this look in his eyes like, I am doing a movie at ILM. And it was just it really like made my heart skip a beat. And like I could,
that's cool.
Like it was really something. And he just stood there, and I don't know how far away that producer walked before he realized that he was still back there. But he was gone for like a minute, and then he was like, where is he? And he like, okay. But yeah, so I had that moment where it was like, I'm watching him, and he didn't know I was there, and he was having this kind of private moment looking at all this stuff, and I'm like, this guy, this is going to be a special movie.
Very cool.
He really, this is not messing around. So then he addressed the crew, and it was very much like, that was the statement he was making of like, hey, look, I'm not thinking about anything else. This is what I'm putting all my energy into. This is a really silly movie. It's all based on, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, none of this movie makes any practical physical sense. It's just about looking cool and being fun. And make it super fun. And, it's all just like a love letter to crazy mech anime weird stuff. And I was like, he means everything he's saying. This isn't just a ploy to try and get to win people over. I'm like, he really believes all this stuff, because I had seen him have that moment. And so, yeah. And then the whole thing went that way. It was just everything about his direction style, and everything was just like, he was just all love. And it was just the best thing ever. And it was super fun to do. And it was just like, yep, this movie doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't matter. It's just
going to be fun.
Super fun. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a good one. But I mean, they've all kind of been good in their own way. Yeah. Rango was a special one too, for that one. Yeah. For that reason.
Favorite characters you got to work on that kind of stand out?
Let's see. I liked animating those Transformers characters, because they were, in a way, they're so simple. They're just, the masses of the body are so obvious. It's like, you got a big chest, and they're kind of like the big superhero-ish shapes, and they're exaggerated. And then you got all these weird things that stick off them, so you can do all this weird secondary animation. Cool.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them are really big, and so it's fun to kind of add weight to them and try to make things. But yeah, I had a ton of fun doing those, like making, like, I can make it so it's like, it's a cartoony thing, and I can do like cartoony, like overdone motion, because they're big and like stylistically designed, but then I can put all the realism into all the secondary stuff and add weight to it that way. And it was just, yeah, those are really fun to do.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then the Rango ones were fun to do too. Like every single one of those characters, when we looked at the production art, it's just like, I want to animate characters. Yeah. And I got to animate just about every single one. And it was just like, yeah, those are the best too. Like, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Those were good ones.
Now, I know you mentioned a little bit here earlier too, just the style, but what is it that you're looking forward to teaching here at iAnimate?
I'm happy to teach anything. I've taught some animals and creatures stuff, so I'm interested in doing that again. And again, it's like, the way it goes at ILM is you'll work on certain shows, and you can go for a long stint of doing certain kinds of things. And there's a lot of variety, and it's been a while since I've done some like real creature-y type stuff. So that sounds exciting to me right
Very
now.
Cool.
It'll be fun to get back to that. And right now I'm doing kind of a secret project, and it's all like super detailed, realistic facial animation, and like super realistic keyframe facial animation.
Cool.
Based on like living people, where there's a ton of reference. So it's like very super granular of like, she moves her lips like this when she makes this sound. And it's really fascinating. And I've learned a ton of stuff. I've done a lot of facial animation, but this is like levels beyond. And it's great. It's, again, like you were saying about like, okay, we're animating this now. It's an excuse to go and like dig deep into this thing.
Right.
And that's I mean, it's like, okay, well now I'm digging deep into facial animation, and the whole thing is all like, it's all leaning into this, like, well, there's this funneler shape and the way you turn your lips out when you make these shapes. I'm like, I've never even done that. Like, I've always just made the and do the thing, and it's like, well, nope, this muscle pulls here, and like everything we talk about is like, you have the, you've got the corrugator muscle. Let's dial that in a little bit more, and it's all about like the physiology of it. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's it's great. It's being like, okay, we're doing specifically this. So the idea of doing like stylized creatures or something like that sounds great, because it's the opposite of what I've been doing. And then the last couple of shows, like I worked on the Aladdin movie, and it was a lot of that kind of stuff too.
Okay.
Like detailed facial animation, and then it's mostly motion capture, where you're, typically when we work with motion capture, it's like, yeah, this is great, but that arm gesture doesn't work. We're not going to reshoot the motion capture because Will Smith is long gone working on something else. And we're not going to put it, you can't like, you can do motion blender, I guess, and blend things together, but we didn't end up just like, well, just blow away that arm and do another gesture, and just make it look like the thing he did in the reference, and or in a different shot, or find a way to make it look like it fits in, that kind of thing. So it's interesting in that, but it's a lot of the same kind of stuff where it's like, okay, find a bit of reference that, okay, I can justify doing this kind of the hands, and it fits into the thing. So it's like its own kind of puzzle. So to do something stylized and do something that's like, it's based in reality, it's animals and kind of blending things together, but it's something more fantastic.
Yeah.
It sounds super fun. Like,
very cool.
That sounds great right now.
Well, one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, is just, I love the opportunity to get guys like you in. When you look at your resume, being in the industry for this long, our classes are live. The fact that we're able to interact with you, it's exciting for me to have someone here like you at teaching at iAnimate. I know for our students, it's going to be a unique opportunity. You obviously love animation, and it's going to be really cool having you here as an instructor.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm super excited. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, like I said before, like I feel like it's the way to learn is to get someone to just kind of like go this way, go a little bit this way. Like, you own the creative stuff, like you're invested in it, but let's a little more of this, and maybe don't do that. And
Very cool.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
Well, Erik, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to having you here and taking our students to the next level here. So,
thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, see ya.